There are two major times in every kid's life: school time and summertime. The seasonal mecca for kids, summer meant waking up without an alarm clock and taking the day as it would come. I had a friend who lived right around the corner from me. I'd spend the night at his house 4 days straight, and the next 3 days, he'd spend the night at mine. They were really some of the best days I still cherish to this day. In between fun with friends and sleeping until noon was some quality time spent with wonderful cartoons. And one of the ones I looked forward to most was Tiny Toon Adventures. A spin-off of the original Looney Tunes, Tiny Toon Adventures follows the story of the cartoon students of Acme University being taught by their classic counterparts. I adored this show. The characters, the comedy, it was the right cartoon for my age, and I ate it up. I even had the Super Nintendo video game Buster Busts Loose. I remember my excitement being at an all-time high the first time I discovered there was a Tiny Toons movie. And when I watched it, from the opening to the end credits, I was in love. It gave me the usual humor I had grown accustomed to in the show, but the movie was longer, focused on more characters, looked great, had fun musical numbers, and most importantly, touched on a time in my life that was the most joyous: vacation time. There's a lot to get to, so let's revisit the summer I wish would never end. Tiny Toon Adventures: How I Spent My Vacation. A brief overview of Tiny Toons as a whole. Tiny Toon Adventures is a spin-off of the classic Looney Tunes cartoons. The characters in the show are students at Acme University, a school employing the original Looney Tunes such as Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck to teach the up-and-coming Toons comedy. The show is produced by Warner Brothers in collaboration with Steven Spielberg and ran from 1990 to 1992, with a total of 98 episodes and 3 specials, with How I Spent My Vacation having historical significance behind it. Running at an hour and 19 minutes, Vacation was originally slated for a theatrical release, but in an article from the Miami Herald, this is going to be a long quote, so bear with me, Warner Brothers discussed with executive producer Steven Spielberg whether the film should be released in theaters, but Spielberg insisted on a direct-to-video release. Spielberg said that he wanted to make the film a direct-to-video release because animated features are ideally suited for the repeat viewing, a factor he found important to the genre's appeal to those watching animated films at home. This may seem like an obvious route to take now, but this was a revolutionary decision at the time, being the first feature-length animated film for the direct-to-video market released in the US. At that time, the concept of a direct-to-video animated feature was so strange to consumers that some mistakenly thought How I Spent My Vacation was a collection of Tiny Toon Adventures episodes. And because retailers had high demand for the film, Warner Brothers shipped to them nearly 1 million copies, which the Los Angeles Times noted as a record for direct-to-video programs. So based off the given information, it's safe to say the movie was a massive accomplishment that blazed the trail for all future cartoon video releases. But what about the film itself? To reach that kind of success, it must have been good, right? I won't leave you in suspense. It's a madcap hour and 20 minutes of fun, so let's get loony with Tiny Toon Adventures: How I Spent My Vacation. We begin in a classroom at the Looniversity with the kids singing a song about counting down the minutes until they can leave for summer vacation. It's the perfect way to capture the anticipation of being able to escape your scholastic prison. I may not have remembered the words before rewatching, but there was a flood of puerile excitement from recognizing the melody. To make it clear, this isn't a musical. There are 2 short songs and an instrumental, but they all include the main theme, just with altered lyrics. But the theme is so catchy on its own, I could hear 100 interpretations and still want more. The song ends with Dodo coming out from the clock dressed as a baseball umpire, yelling to the kids, "You're out." Plucky asks Hampton what they should spend their summer doing, with thought bubbles behind him. He interacts with them for better and for worse, featuring the ability of Tiny Toons to make even the smallest things humorous. Hampton shares that his family is going to the subtly named amusement park Happy Wacky Land, and Plucky desperately wants to go with them. After numerous attempts to get invited, he's finally picked up by the family, which includes Hampton, his parents, and Uncle Stinky. Meanwhile, Babs starts on her plan to get a tan, but is interrupted by Buster, who sprays her with his water gun, leading to a water gun fight. I totally forgot about those. It's making me nostalgic for the summers from my youth, and we're only a few minutes in. Buster and Babs continue spraying each other, with Babs going so far as to open up the water dam that ends up flooding the town. We get a funny visual of Elmira's dog Byron seeing the impending tidal wave, and being the lazy dog he is, he gets up, circles around, then lies back down in his exact same spot. It's funny to see throughout the whole movie just how mellow he is. Fair warning, we're going to be jumping around sporadically between characters because that's how the movie is. Even in the end credits, which slips jokes in between the real credits, one of the end credits says, "Moral of the story, pick one," and one of the options is, "Feature-length movies should not have 18 different plots." It may be jarring when I'm talking about the movie, but it's much smoother in actual execution. Next, we join Shirley the Loon, who's working a summer job as a palm reader, and being bothered to go to a movie by Foulmouth. I always thought Shirley was with Plucky in the series, but it seems like she sort of goes off with both of them when it's convenient. It's not at all important to the story, it's just something I've noticed since I was a child and has been taking up valuable space in my mind. We check back in with Plucky, and Hampton's family is unbearable. It brought me back to the days of hanging out with your friends and their parents, but for an extended period of time, longer than you ever had before, and the excitement you initially feel is followed swiftly by the nightmare it is when you find out that people's families do things differently than yours. For instance, Hampton's family sings 99 bottles of non-alcoholic beverage on the wall instead of beer, which is okay, but then they play There's a Car, where they exclaim anytime they see a car to Plucky's pain. There's a funny scene where the car comes up to a tunnel, and they say that if you hold your breath through a tunnel, your wish will come true. So they all hold their breath, and this is the first scene where the already great animation begins to really stand out. Tiny Toons always had a very appealing art style, and the animation was always very wacky with smooth fluidity, but in this movie, there's some small but noticeable scenes that go above that usual standard. The first we see of this is when they enter the tunnel. Firstly, the scenes at night and in the dark in this movie are just gorgeous to look at. The backgrounds throughout are truly phenomenal. It looks like they were brought from a more serious cartoon and used as backgrounds here, because they're so stunning, especially the nighttime scenes, the shading, just the overall look of them. It honestly makes me wish that the entire movie took place at night. It looks that good. One moment in particular in this tunnel scene is when Plucky is struggling to hold his breath, and the colors that he changes are just beautiful bright shades of red, blue, and purple that shine through even in the enclosed tunnel. And again, the animation flows so naturally, most often in the close-ups. So if this movie was in the dark and only close-ups, you may have to give it the Oscar because it would look perfect. Now I'd venture to think that this is attributed to two factors: its $350,000 budget and the animation studio, which would have benefited from the increased financials, that being TMS Entertainment, a Japanese entertainment company that has worked on some beloved properties from both the East and the West, from Lupin the Third and Sonic X to DuckTales and Batman the Animated Series. Buster and Babs are floating down a river with Elmira's dog Byron, and there's a shot of them going underneath a bridge and a country possum playing the banjo, and I love this shot. It makes this 2D world have depth and seem bigger. It looks so good, I'm almost wondering if it's early 3D. Because there's another shot where Hampton's family is driving in another tunnel in pitch black that looks similar to the 3D that may have been used at that time. Buster and Babs and Byron fall off a waterfall and find their way to a possum farm. Buster finds the possum with the banjo, and the two play the Tiny Toons theme song together, a la dueling banjos, as the rest of the possum family chases Babs for dinner. It's a fun sequence where Babs is chased by the ravenous country possum family that gives off a Texas Chainsaw Massacre vibe. Even the baby's chasing her. And here, the banjo version of the Tiny Toons theme song is so good and catchy, I could listen to it for however long it decided to play for. Back in Acme Acres, Fifi LaFume pines to meet her celebrity crush, Johnny LePew, and sneaks into the hotel where he's staying. Johnny LePew is a marvelously detestable character, simultaneously taking advantage of and ignoring Fifi's infatuation with him, making her carry his things while refusing to sign an autograph for her. At one point, Fifi says, "I'd die for you," to which Johnny responds, "I know, but that won't be necessary. You can just carry my stuff." Back on the road trip, Hampton and his family eat mayonnaise and cream cheese sandwiches. With the crust cut off, of course, because that would be gross if they were left on. The thing that ends up making Hampton carsick, though, is reading Plucky's vintage, mint-condition comic book, which he proceeds to throw up all over. Getting carsick is something that hasn't happened to me in years. This movie's really taking me back. Rejoining Buster and Babs, we come across what I would say is the most gorgeous shot this movie has to offer. Babs is rowing their table, acting as a boat down the river, and they're surrounded by fireflies. We're only able to see the bunny silhouettes against the night sky, but it gives this the gravitas of a film as opposed to just a normal episode. Buster and Babs wash ashore where they come upon 3 Southern belles, who also happen to be sisters, and alligators. Their father says that Buster and his 3 daughters are to be wed, and finally, after enjoying Buster's squirming, Babs rescues him. We then join Elmira and her family going through a drive-through safari zoo after she loses Furball. She sees a cheetah out her window, and as she slips out of the car to get it, an announcement over the zoo loudspeaker says, "We're hoping you're enjoying Wild Safari Zoo. May I repeat, so that Warner Brothers won't get sued if anybody really does this, do not get out of the car." Talk about ahead of the times. As a kid, I laughed at what a ridiculous thought it was. Now I laugh at how legally preemptive it is. She catches the cheetah and rips off his fur and dances in it while wearing them like footy pajamas. The safari ends with all the animals commandeering Elmira's family's car and driving away from her as quickly as possible. Back with Hampton and Plucky, the family picks up a hitchhiker. Immediately after, they hear on the radio that there's a serial killer on the loose and that any exposure to pork makes him crazy. And right on schedule, the guy starts to lose it, revving a chainsaw tucked away in his shirt, visible to only Plucky, with the rest of the family totally oblivious. Every time he revs his saw, he says a pig dish of food like pork chops or bacon. It made me laugh how specifically threatening he was. In an attempt to receive help, Plucky writes a letter and sticks it in a mailbox in another rotating camera scene. It's like a sleight of hand on the eyes. It's mesmerizing to look at. And in perhaps the most shocking, history-making scene in all of cartoons, the mail carrier carrying Plucky's letter gets loaded into a mail truck, which is parked in front of the Roadrunner. And as the Roadrunner sticks his tongue out ready to bolt, the mail truck beats him to it and runs him over. The Roadrunner became roadkill. Who knew it would take snail mail to outrun the Roadrunner? And even better, the mail truck has a bumper sticker that says, "I break for coyotes." Vindication at last. Foulmouth finally drags Shirley to a movie, Skunknophobia, where he proceeds to talk and call out all the upcoming scenes to the angry dismay of the theater. The person in front of him gets so enraged, he throws Foulmouth into the movie, where the actors then get annoyed by him and launch him out of the theater to the cheers of the audience. Fifi and Johnny also happen to be at the movie, and when Johnny starts paying attention to another skunk girl and goes so far as to sign an autograph for her in front of Fifi, it finally sets her off and she kicks Johnny out of the theater, also to the cheering of the crowd. Still downriver but finally ready to head home, Buster and Babs happen upon a steamboat with a creepy frog captain who plans to put the two in his dinner show. We cut back to Plucky, who's in the car with the psycho hitchhiker, who now mentions that he hates ducks. Of all the dumb luck. Against all odds, they ditch the hitchhiker and arrive at Happy World Land, celebrated with a humorous song about the scam of theme parks. I quote, "Happiness doesn't stop at $80 a pop." The rides there are great parodies. The Happy Crasher, which is a rocket-powered roller coaster whose tracks end in midair, leading the roller coaster to nosedive into the ground, and Happy Centrifuge, which spins the group of riders so fast it releases them as one gelatinous blob. The monorail is shaped like teeth and is called the Tooth Fairy, which is really clever. I love that. And to top it off, after taking the monorail tour of the park, they decide to leave. Hampton's dad citing that they don't want to overdo it and think of what they'll have to look forward to next time, with Plucky's reaction being hilarious and absolutely earned. Babs and Buster are performing at the ship's dinner theater, and one of the things I've always enjoyed about the Tiny Toons, specifically Babs and Buster, is their showmanship. They perform their comedy like it's a job, an act, as actual performers would. Buster is the straight man and Babs is the costume-shifting color humorist. When they turn the dinner theater lights on, all the audience is made up of possums and gators and others they've encountered across the trip who want to eat them. Byron flies in with his floppy ears and face and rescues them and they fly away. Byron is awesome. The two are chased by the hungry mob and eventually also by the pig psycho, but are briefly rescued by the banjo-playing possum. They take a minecart to try and escape, but the psycho follows them close behind in a minecart of his own. Plucky and Hampton's family finally arrive back home and he's so happy that he kisses the ground, to which Hampton's dad says that they just had the lawn fertilized. Plucky just can't catch a break. But before he's allowed to go, he has to watch the slideshow of their boring vacation. Hampton's dad asks if Hampton gave the hitchhiker their address so he could visit, and Hampton says that he didn't, but he gave him Plucky's address. That's a nice ending to wrap up that story. Even when Plucky thinks he's out, he's back in. The minecart chase ends with the hitchhiker careening into a canyon, and Buster, Babs, the possum, and Byron are about to fall off a cliff too. Babs is about to reveal her feelings for Buster, but he interrupts her and says he feels the same way. It makes me wonder if Seinfeld didn't lift this scene. In part 1 of that finale, their plane is going down and Elaine and Jerry are about to confess their feelings to each other until their plane straightens out. I say that in jest, of course, but in one episode of Seinfeld, he does watch Tiny Toons, so stranger things have occurred. Luckily, their minecart falls into a literal plot hole, and they fall into the steps of Acme University, where they get back just in time for the first day of school. The movie ends with the kids singing a song about the end of their summer and being back in class to the Tiny Toons theme. To me, Tiny Toons How I Spent My Vacation is the perfect ending to the series. But just to clarify, it wasn't anywhere near the official ending. There was a full third season, a spring break special, and a Halloween special that ultimately acted as the show's finale. But this was the end of the original run, before it got moved to Fox Kids. And to me, it was the end of the golden age of Tiny Toons, admittedly mostly due to the change in animation for Season 3, whether that's fair or not. Tiny Toons How I Spent My Vacation was revolutionary from an industry standpoint, showing that a cartoon could be successful in a feature-length format without having to go to theaters, and that it was possible for an animated show to succeed in the home market. On a personal level, I believe it manages to not only satisfy, but exceed the expectations for what an extended Tiny Toons show could be. I hadn't watched the movie in years, and was curious to whether or not I would feel the same as I did when my friend would load the cassette into their VCR. Would the years gone by allow me to still have that same sense of wonderment I did as a child? Well, thankfully, I found that all it took for me to travel back there was to press the play button. And I can happily say that even though the seasons may change, this summer never has to end.